Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Lacey Wiggins. I'm the EVP of Americas at Search Laboratory, and welcome to today's online workshop, Future-Proofing Attribution in B2B Marketing. We'll go ahead and we'll start with a bit of housekeeping. The workshop should last about 30 to 45 minutes. If you do have any questions as we go along, please send them in the chat box on the side of your screen, and we'll try to save some time to cover those at the end. But very briefly, for those who aren't familiar with Search Laboratory, we're an integrated global digital marketing agency. We have about 150 people that are split between the US and the UK. And in practical terms, we drive profitable growth for our clients through digital marketing and data science. I won't spend a ton of time telling you about us. I want to leave as much time for David as possible. But we basically have a list of services that we offer across key areas: performance marketing, data science, growth strategy, and global reach. And this is just a visual representation of that. At Search Laboratory, we've always had a pretty good list of B2B clients, especially here in the US. We've been working with B2B companies over the past 15 years. So we are very familiar with the challenges that come with B2B marketing. And it's our goal to find ways and solutions to help our clients solve these challenges for you guys. So as mentioned, I'm Lacey. Our expert for the day is David Howlett. I'll be passing over to him shortly. David has been with Search Lab for about 8 years now, starting with our paid media team and moving into digital strategy. But he currently sits as our data solutions architect. He uses the power of cloud-based solutions to find value from our clients' data. He's worked with a multitude of B2B clients over the past years. He's helping them use their own data to generate better returns on their marketing investments. So I will go ahead, pass it on to him, and let him get started.
Thank you very much, Lacey. So today I'm going to be running through, firstly, just identifying what the attribution challenges are so that we're all on the same page, and then move on to how we could implement a simple solution, and then the centralization of data that's required to implement some more complex solutions, like predictive modeling, for example. So when it comes to B2B attribution challenges, there is quite a few, but here's 4 key challenges that I've pulled out. The first one being that there's often multiple stakeholders within a business when they're making a purchase. And what we quite often find when looking at B2B client data is that there's often multiple different user journeys from different stakeholders within a business when they're purchasing your products. So you might find that 2 or 3 people within a business, for example, have downloaded a different white paper each or filled in a form, for example. And obviously, when we talk about lead generation, that does bring quite a few complexities with regards to the fact that there can be multiple different ways of actually filling in a lead. So I mentioned white papers there, for example. You might already have 20 or 30 different types of content that are all gated, for instance. You could also have contact forms, sales forms, quotes, phone calls, for example. And of course, if you're in fact transactional based, then you might not necessarily have the lead generation side of things, but there's all that information that we need to work around when it comes to transactions as well. And what we typically see is that there's a clear disconnect between the research phase and the buying phase, and that's not really too surprising when you consider just how long it can take to qualify a B2B sale, sometimes upwards of a whole year. So this mix of long purchase cycles and a disconnect means that typically B2B clients find that their investment is heavily weighted towards the last final clicks of a sale. And what we're going to run through today is how we start to solve some of those attribution issues and show where value can be attributed further up the user journey, so that you can better align your investment and ultimately drive more sales in the end. So there's 3 key aspects to this. The firstly is that we have to acknowledge that each customer has a different value. And what we really mean by this is if you were to walk into a store the person standing next to you would like to have a different value to that business. You know, maybe you're a new customer, whereas they're existing. Maybe they've got a product in hand, they're ready to purchase, you're looking at different products, etc. There's a multitude of different behaviors, attributes, and actions that any individual could be taking that would indicate that they're going to have a different value to a business. Now, when it comes to value, there's two ways we split it. First is the value today when they make a purchase. And the things there they have to consider are things like product costs, service costs, shipping costs, returns rates, etc., to really identify what was the profit of that individual sale today. In some cases, you might be selling a service that has a minimum contract on it, for example. And then we've got the value tomorrow, and that's really saying that whilst each sale has a different value today based on the actual profit we're going to drive from that sale, the actual user themselves or the actual customer themselves is also going to have a different value tomorrow based on their likelihood to continue to purchase, what products they might purchase next, etc. And that's where lifetime value comes from. So to incorporate these three key aspects, what we typically do is build a data roadmap, and this is something I recommend that all businesses should have. And it's really a roadmap of how you start walking, jogging, and then sprinting, getting that best-in-class projects are on the go, really. Because obviously we'd all like to be doing the best-in-class things, but we acknowledge the fact that there's actually a road to achieving that, and it's often better to do the quicker, easier wins first before you get onto the more expensive and complex projects with your data. So starting off small, starting off simple, what we're going to do is look at a quick solution to getting attribution away from that last click and moving it up the user journey more into the research phase. We do that by analyzing CRM data. So this first step here. Now, when it comes to extracting value from your CRM, there's three key questions that you should be asking yourself. Firstly, how are you currently servicing insights from your CRM? It might be that you're currently doing nothing with it, which obviously is a key starting block. We need to improve upon that. Or it might be that you've actually got a team that are pulling insights out. And then the question really becomes, well, how are they being pulled out and how are they being actioned? So it's quite common that we see businesses that have an insight team that's maybe pulling out various charts and PowerPoints. But the real key test of the value of it is how is it being actioned? Are those insights making it all the way into your marketing teams? Are they changing how they're spending your marketing budgets based on those insights? For example, the lifetime value of one form fill versus another, how does that differ between different white papers? How does it differ between different products that you sell, etc.? And a key thing that you should also be asking yourself is, where does your data currently sit, and is it in a place that's easily accessible, and are you able to get the insights that you need out of it, or do we need to find a new solution there? So it's good to establish a user journey for your business so that you can start to actually piece some of this together. If I put an example on the screen right now, somebody comes to the home page, they'll inevitably look at certain products, certain services, which is telling you information about that person, what they're interested in. They'll probably at some point access some sort of content. Ideally, that should be gated so that you collect some information on them when they look at this content. And then they might return via email because you've got their email address, you've remarketed to them, fill in a contact form, and ultimately purchase over the phone. Of course, this is quite a cherry-picked example, and the user journey could span over many months with many, many more touch points. But it sort of drives the point home that you should be looking at your user journey and think, at what point am I identifying these people? So in this example here, we've got 3 different touch points where a potential customer is identifying themselves. We've got their email address when they filled in the white paper. We've probably got it again when they filled in the contact form, maybe their business name at this point, and then again over the phone when they actually made the purchase. So if you've identified at what points you're collecting identifiable information about your potential customers, you can then start to pull out these insights. So first of all, you want to look at your CRM data, extract it into a tool that allows you to really pull your data apart and look at those specific user journeys and how those various different touch points where you can identify them come together. In our case, we typically use BigQuery for this. You then want to value each customer. So if you've got 10 years worth of data, you should calculate the lifetime value of each and every customer over that 10-year period, over multiple horizons. So what does a 18-month lifetime value look like compared to a 3-year lifetime value, for example? Once you've done that and you've valued every customer, the key here is to then segment that data, group your customers into various categories. Obviously, key ones would be the different products that you sell, the different services that you sell. date. To give you an example, we quite often find that Black Friday typically leads to a lower lifetime value in a lot of cases. And also you want to be grouping by things like source. When people come through a particular PPC campaign, how does that change their lifetime value, for example? And when you surface these insights, don't surface them in a PowerPoint. That's not to say you can't do a presentation on them, but fundamentally, when you're surfacing insights, you want to do it you want to visualize it in something like Looker Studio, Power BI, Tableau, for example, so that the data is interactable. Otherwise, what happens is you only get a singular view of the data and you have to make decisions off that, whereas you want stakeholders and your marketing team to be able to segment your data down to look at a particular product on a particular date range and particular different customer attributes, for example. And that's really how you surface key insights out of your CRM data. So the example on the right here is just a singular page we've got from, I think it's one of 16 pages in this dashboard that we built that drill into various different key things for the various stakeholders of that data. Now, what typically comes out of doing this type of work is the following. So you'll be able to adjust your KPIs for lifetime value. This is particularly true if maybe you are more e-com focused, you've got a transactional website. You don't really want to be optimizing towards a singular transaction value. You want to be optimizing towards a lifetime value there, and that's going to differ between products. Some products will have, maybe 2-3 times the lifetime value of other products. You can also adjust for returns rates and therefore make sure that you're always making profit. And looking at buyer behaviors is really important. So you can, when you pull apart your CRM data, you can then see people who buy X typically go on to buy Y. And to give you an example here, we worked with a B2B furniture sales business we found that for every £1 of desks we were selling, we were also selling another 80p of other products. So that's to say that essentially selling a desk is worth 80% more than the actual price ticket of that desk. And lastly, we've got response type KPIs. This is really crucial. So currently you might find that you're optimizing towards a basic CPA where any type of response, whether it's a form fill or a white paper or a phone call, for instance, you just say $300 CPA against that, for example. But once you've investigated your CRM data, you can say, well, this particular white paper is worth $150 on average, whereas this one over here is worth 400 or 200 or whatever it is, for example. And that's really powerful for your marketing teams. So the key thing here is we don't just surface insights to talk about them, we surface them so that we can act on them, so we can implement them into our marketing strategy. So the next stage is how do we realign what we're doing to this new insight. So the first thing I'd recommend doing is segmenting your customer data by the first actions that they're taking. And this is really how we implement a simpler solution to attribution. We know that last click is one of the worst things we could do for B2B because there's so much research phase. And a simple solution is to instead move as far up the user journey as we can to when we first get access to that potential customer. So in this case, we're saying let's segment our lifetime values by the first inquiry method they used, whether or not that's a phone call, white paper, for example, the first product they purchased, particularly if it's transactional, and also inquiry dates and, if possible, the source they came through, a particular campaign. And once you've done this, you can now feed this into your marketing team. So you want to be enriching your marketing platforms, whether or not it's Meta or LinkedIn, or putting it into GA4, where maybe you've got 20 different types of form fills, and each form has now a different expected revenue value against it. And all these things can be plugged straight into your auto bidding algorithms to greatly improve your performance. Now, the last thing that's perhaps a bit unexpected is that you've now just gone through working with your CRM data. You should be reviewing that data cleanliness and identifying next steps. So what I mean by this is it's quite common to find errors within your data once you work on it in this kind of granularity. So you want to be documenting your accuracies so that solutions can be implemented. You also want to be looking to challenge assumptions. If there's certain figures that typically fly around the business, typical lifetime value is X, for example, you can actually challenge them with these insights. And the whole point of doing this really is to build a value proposition for more advanced solutions. If you can implement a solution here where you're now bidding towards some expected values that you've calculated out of your CRM, that's a great first step to building the business case for putting in a more complex model, such as using machine learning, for example. Now, if you've got a transactional website, and obviously I've talked about lead gen quite a lot at the moment, there's a few key things you should also be looking at. So the first one is that you should be optimizing towards profit instead of transaction revenue. And there's quite a simple way of doing this, really. You need to centralize your product cost data and your delivery cost data into one place. Once you've done that, you can calculate the profit of every single transaction going through your website. And the power of GA4 here is that you can actually push that data straight into GA4 hourly if you'd like, and then use GA4's data-driven attribution model to attribute profit across the various touch points. This is obviously really powerful because it enables you to now optimize directly towards one of your most important business growth goals. Rather than revenue, you can optimize the key difference between revenue and profit, and that's that you can have two products of the same cost, but with greatly different product margins against them. Now, as always, it's really important you surface this kind of data in the dashboards. Don't just put it into PowerPoints, as I said before, and that allows you to eke out these kind of insights, such as the impacts of free delivery. Whenever we do this kind of work, we often find that there'll be multiple products that a business is selling that, due to free delivery, they're not actually profitable to bid on with things like PPC, for example. And that then leads those businesses to enrich their product buying strategy by taking the data that we're surfacing, where you can see, here's my marketing data against the profit of individual SKUs. And you can actually take that to your suppliers and use it to leverage better rates. When that's not the case, however, it also gives you the information you need to optimize your product pricing so that you can become more profitable as a business that way. And the reason we do all this, of course, is so that we can build those product-driven marketing strategies where individual products are grouped together and specific strategies are built and campaigns to target the profitability of those products. So far what we've done is we've analyzed our data so that we can solve initial attribution issues, getting more information towards the front of the user journey, putting values on those initial touch points. We've also identified that where possible we can pull profit through on those sales as well, which is obviously crucial to do. The next stage is where we need to now get into data centralization so that we can unlock some more advanced data projects that you can do. So really what we mean by data centralization is building a complete view across GA, any physical stores you've got, your paid channels and CRM, bringing all that data into one place. Now there's quite a few challenges to doing this. A key one being that there's often multiple stakeholders for the various different data feeds that you'll have within your business. You know, someone might own the data around product pricing, whereas another person owns logistics and someone else owns your marketing data, for example. So there are things, that's something that you're going to have to solve. You need to get all on the same page there. Once you've done that, it's quite typical to then look for solutions online, and you want to be a bit careful about quite a lot of the black box solutions that you'll see, where it's typically you're buying a software and plugging all your data in, but it's a bit of a black box. And what can come of that is you can have data ownership issues where you're no longer easily able to do some of the CRM analysis that we've just run through, for example, because your data is now essentially in this black box. So it's really important that you do get some expert knowledge to sort of guide you through this process and make sure that once you've built your data roadmap, you're going to be able to achieve exactly what you want at the prices that you want to achieve it at. So the key thing to do this is to define your next steps. So you need to ask yourself, what data do I have available to me? And really make a list of all the data that you think you should be centralizing into one place. The next key step then is to say, well, what are my priorities? And it's very easy to make this really long list of all the various data sources you've got across the business and then get stuck trying to build a solution that incorporates the whole thing, whereas actually your priorities may really align with only one or two sets of data. And that's really where pain points come in. So understanding what your pain points across the business are, and then understanding the data requirements to solve those pain points is how you limit this list down to the most crucial sets of data that you should begin to centralize. And you can always build on that moving forwards. So when it comes to data centralization, the most important thing you as a business could do is joining your online and your offline data together. So that's saying someone's come onto the website, they've exhibited various behaviors, they've filled in a form, or they've identified themselves in some way, maybe via a transaction. Whenever they do that, you want to surface the client ID from GA into your CRM, and that's essentially just saying this is a key to the session that they had on your website. Now this is important because if you're using GA4, you've also got a BigQuery export of everything everything that your customers are doing on your website. It's row by row, every action they've taken at what millisecond of the day. Now, by joining these two data sets together, you can start to do some really powerful data analysis and start bringing in things like machine learning to do some really clever stuff. And when you're approaching this, you want to make sure that the approach you're taking is scalable. So find the most crucial priorities, the most important data pain points, solve them first and build them in a platform that enables you to scale upwards. For example, in our case, we typically use BigQuery to achieve these. So once you've centralized some or maybe all of your data, the first step to be thinking is, how do I make this actionable? Because as I'm sure you're all aware, building the business case for these types of projects requires actionable insights to be gleaned out of them. So the key thing that we would recommend doing is enriching your GA4. And how you do that is to first of all build a measurement plan. And by building a measurement plan, what you're really saying is, when someone identifies themselves on my website, these are the things I want to surface about them. These are the key pieces of information that I want to make available to my marketing team. A really good example of this would be when someone identifies themselves, you flag if they're a new or existing customer. And this allows your marketing team now to start spending their budget where you're driving new customers rather than perhaps where you're driving the existing customers. So, for example, you might typically find that certain pieces of content on your website are typically viewed by newer customers rather than existing ones. There's all other sorts of KPIs you could be surfacing as well, such as the typical month this person would purchase in, or products that they've previously purchased, expected lifetime values of this person, for example. And the reason we do all this is so that we can build audiences directly within GA4 itself and then push them out to the various channels such as PPC, DV360, for example. So we've gone through quite a lot so far. We're now into that best-in-class sprinting phase. And we get on to business intelligence, which is really the crucial way that you surface those insights out of your CRM. We've already gone through an example of doing that with a singular extract of data. Now you're looking to automate that process. Now, BI is obviously a very big topic, and I'm only going to briefly touch on it. But what you want to be thinking of when you're building a solution to surfacing those actionable insights is first of all, you need to make sure you're surfacing your business growth KPIs. You've centralized all your data, and that means that you should be able to do things like calculate profit, lifetime value, new customer acquisition, retention, anything that you as a business have identified as your key growth KPIs. You should be able to surface that within this visualization now. And really importantly, you need to make sure that you're using one source of truth for all your insights. It's quite common to have multiple different reports being passed around the business, and when you ask the same question of those reports, sometimes you get different answers. So from this point forward now, you've got your one source of truth, whether or not it's in Power BI, Tableau, Looker, for example, and all questions are asked of that singular source. Now, segmentation is the secret to great insights, and what that really means is that as you're building your business intelligence solution, you need to make sure that you're offering really granular segmentation, because that's where the insights will come from. There's only so much value to reporting at a top level. And by that I mean things like being able to look at the performance of an individual product that you sell against various types of customers, and how that differs over different periods of time, for example. Now, business intelligence is an iterative process. It's very hard to describe what you want the solution to be, but it's often very easy to say what you don't like about a solution when it's presented to you. And you have to keep that in mind, that as a result of that, you're going to be building prototypes and surfacing information. And as you see that new information, it's going to give you new ideas to surface new things. So to definitely treat it as an iterative process and expect it to be an ongoing process over multiple months. So we've rattled through that quite quickly, but we're now coming to the end of the best-in-class solutions that you as a business should be implementing if you're looking to solve some of your attribution issues in B2B. And that's really where we use machine learning to do the heavy lifting. So now we're going to be talking about how we attribute over long user journeys. And really the key business challenges that we're looking to solve are breaking up a user journey into as many touch points as we can identify, and that also means going beyond that first transaction as well. A customer's journey only really begins with the first transaction for a lot of businesses. You know, 3 years later, they're hopefully still purchasing from you, and that is still one long continuous user journey. We also want to get away from arbitrary targets. So earlier on, we discussed how we could better enrich our targets by putting individual values on different response types, for example. But there's still static targets of saying this particular piece of content's worth $300, for example. What we want to do is we want to say, for this individual with their characteristics, this piece of content's worth $350, for example. And as a result of doing all this, we end up valuing individual touch points, and that opens up a lot of opportunity in the top of funnel, where we can now build investment strategies based on the quality of the traffic that you're sending, rather than hoping that they get all the way through to filling in a form, and otherwise we don't see any value against them. So what is estimated value modeling, and what do we really mean by machine learning? The best example I can give you is to take a car salesman. So if you were to go into a particular store and you would talk to the car salesman, they would be able to point out which of the patrons there is worth likely the most money, so and who's most likely to purchase. And they know this because they're having conversations with each person that's coming into the store. They know what trim you're interested in, what the budget is that you've got. They know if you've already had a test drive, for example. And really, someone having a test drive is no different to having filled in a form on your website, for example. They're giving up information. You're having a conversation with them, even if it's not direct. And humans are really good at processing this kind of information and having an educated guess on what your likely value will be and what your chances of purchase are. And what we're doing is we're emulating that with machine learning. We're feeding it thousands and thousands of data points to build that car salesman for everyone who goes through your website. So if we were to take the user journey that we ran through earlier and apply this type of thinking, this type of machine learning model, what ends up happening is that we can take all these identified touch points that we had before, so the white paper, the contact form, the phone call, and we can process all the data we have about these people, these individuals at these various touch points, so that we can best value an individual as they reach this spot. And what ends up happening is you end up in a situation where, say, someone's come to your homepage, and if they come to the homepage and they bounce, they never come back. Well, on average, that person's worth $1.38, right? So we know that actually, if we've got 1,000 people that look like that, one of them would probably purchase. Whereas if someone goes a bit further down the user journey, they've viewed 3 products, 3 services, for example, we've now got an understanding of what products they're interested in, and they've shown much more commitment than someone who's just got to the homepage. And as a result of that, we can probably find 10,000 other people that look very similar to them, and then say, on average, someone exhibiting these type of attributes is now worth $79, for example. And we can keep doing this process as we go through and through, and the value that we're predicting goes up as we get more information about this individual, until eventually they purchase, and we can say, well, people have had this user journey and have purchased that product on that day, typically go on to be worth, in this case, $700. So this is how these machine learning models work, essentially. We're crunching all the numbers and comparing an individual's attributes, behaviors, and actions to maybe 10,000 other people, for example, so that we can estimate their value to the best of our knowledge at the time. Now we push these values back into somewhere like GA4, and what essentially you're doing is you're valuing that individual touch point. So if someone came through to your website and they got to the point of viewing 3 products, for example, that session would now be worth $79.86. And that value can be put against whatever activity drove that. Maybe it was prospecting ad, maybe it was a PPC generic keyword, for example. And you can start to see how these machine learning models enable you to essentially value the quality of the traffic that's coming through to your website. Now, to show you what the long-term impact of doing something like this, here is a real model that was built. And what you're seeing in front of you is us totaling up a cohort of every new opportunity that's driven in September there. And what we do when we build these models is we can actually decay your value down to 0 if you never contact this business again. So if you were to fill in a form today, but we don't hear from you for a year, for example, your value is going to be 0 to that business. We assume that you bought somewhere else. Now, if we take these exact same people and we follow them all the way through their user journey to the end, we can also put the actualized revenue that they drove. And what you can see here is that we estimated this cohort to be worth a certain amount of money, and actually 8 months later, they went on to be worth that same amount of money. It's the exact same people. So when you're building these types of model, it allows you to be proactive instead of reactive. You can invest your budget today on the promise of future value from this cohort of people, and you can actually track them through to completion to make sure that the model was accurate, that you are doing the right thing. And this allows your business to flip from reactive to proactive as a result of that. So what are the next steps today that you should take away from this? What should you be doing next? Well, firstly, you need to define your data pain points. You need to go through the various problems that you've maybe got in the business, where, for instance, you've maybe got a boardroom objective to drive new customers, but you know that your marketing team has no visibility over where those new customers are coming from, for example. You need to get these all down, and then you need to build your data roadmap to solve these individual pain points. And you might find that there's actually multiple solutions to solving the same problem, and you have to do it in stages like we've shown today, where the best-in-class solution is to build that machine learning model, but it's much simpler today to just use your CRM data to build a one-off model. Once you've done that, that's really where you need to then talk to someone who's got the expertise to actually scope the solutions out for yourself, so you can understand the prices and understand what the best solution for your business in your particular situation is to solve those data pain points. And that's everything I had to run through today. Have we had any questions come through at all?
Yeah, we've got a few coming through. First question, how long does this process typically take?
It's a good question. So, for example, we've gone through the roadmap that I showed you today with a business in about 10 months before. And the way that we managed to achieve that was that they were essentially running at the same speed we were. Obviously, your mileage is going to vary based on how quickly you can mobilize things like data, surfacing it. And also, if you're doing it internally, how quickly you can make those resources available. If you break your data roadmap down into individual parts, you might find something like analyzing your CRM data can be done in a matter of weeks, 5 to 6 weeks, for example. And that allows you to get running straight away, and then build those longer term projects over the coming months.
Great. Second question, how do I decide where to centralize all of my data?
Yes, that's a good question. So there's obviously a range of solutions available to you. At the top end, sort of the most expensive end, is to buy a CDP. A CDP is essentially a singular location where you can ingest data from many different sources, logistics data, marketing data, product data, for example, all into one point. But what I would recommend doing is really understanding what are my requirements today, and is there a simpler solution I can get going with today, and then build up towards perhaps one of those more advanced solutions. So, for example, we talked about how just joining your GA4 data to your CRM is a massive win for a business. Well, you can easily do that within BigQuery. It doesn't really cost that much to maintain that kind of implementation, and you'll be able to do that a lot quicker. So I would suggest breaking it down into parts, building something simple to begin with so you can get going, and then looking for a more advanced solution if you require it.
Okay, great. And I don't trust that my data is accurate. What can I do there?
That is a very common problem. We quite often talk to businesses where they have insights, but they don't trust them because they're aware of the certain limitations with how they're currently collecting data. Maybe you've got data points that have a habit of being duplicated, for example, within your CRM, or you've got areas where you have just blank data, you haven't managed to record it all properly. Now, the key here is to pick the right tools to do the job. So if you were, for instance, to ingest your data in BigQuery and you have a data engineer, they can often solve a lot of these issues. So even though your data is not necessarily accurate, it can be made to be much more accurate through data engineering, and we can still extract those insights that are required.
Great. It looks like there are no no other questions. So I guess we can go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate everything.
Yep.
Appreciate everybody joining. Hope you found it useful. And yeah, if you have any additional questions, you can always reach out to us on searchlaboratory.com.